Hello everyone, I'm majicDave and this is Sapiens. So it's been another month and it is now end of March 2019. I've made some pretty good progress this month. I think, a lot of the sort of nasty stuff is sort of done and I'm starting to really sort of get stuck into some good stuff. So I've been working on user interface. As you can see, there's a bit of a new look here, and I've also been working on a bunch of gameplay. So the new look is now using 3D models that are actually rendered in place instead of just flat textures. So like these little buttons are just sliding slightly with a little bit of an animation coming in and out. The lighting is actually calculated across the screen. It's rendered in a perspective matrix. So the lighting is all consistent, and yeah, there's quite a few benefits to doing it this way. So I'll talk a bit more about that. But before I do, just wanted to point out this new logo. It's basically like on the walls of caves, they've found ancient paintings where people have put their hands up and then just splattered a pigment across their hands to create handprints. And I just it was one of these little things that just clicked. It was like, man, that would be awesome as the logo for Sapiens. Like, sweet. It turned out great. It's not done, but I think it's just such a good fit for the game. So it's very likely to be pretty similar to this. I'm a big fan of skeuomorphic UI, and that means UI that is sort of based on physical objects. So I want buttons to feel like buttons. I want you to be able to push them and they move and they respond. I'm not at all a fan of this flat UI craze that we're in at the moment. So there's that. But also, I think it fits games better anyway. It's more playful, more interesting, and I think it fits this game too because it's rock, it's like primitive, it's chunky, and so that's part of it. Another really positive thing is that it makes the creation of assets a lot easier. So these are all 3D models that are created in Blender, just like all the 3D models in the game. So if I need to rescale them slightly, not massively, but a little bit, then it's not a problem. I can just change the scale with a simple number, and it will do so, and it will still be pixel perfect. It's resolution independent because it doesn't matter how many pixels it needs to render the mesh, it'll still look fine. For each individual button size and things, I don't have to create a bunch of textures. For animations, I can actually move them in and out, scale them and everything, and they're all still beautifully pixel perfect. It also creates a nice cohesive lighting effect. So that's probably, so you can sort of see it's much lighter over to the right of the options than it is down the bottom left, and there's this sort of gradient over everything, and it all just works. I don't have to do any shading whatsoever. The game rendering is doing that for me. So how it all works is that at some point a few months back, I picked a place and a time and I exported out the light maps. So I've got the facility to do that, and I might change that at any point. But so there is sort of a default light map that can be used to light user interface elements. Now later on, I could actually light all of this using the actual light map of the world, which could be kind of interesting and dynamic. But at least on the main menu, you don't have a world, so you do need some default, and that's what it's using at the moment. So then it uses basically the same code as it uses to render the trees or whatever, and just renders the UI. The text and stuff is a little bit different. It's done with normal maps. So it has this, like, I don't know if it'll show up in the video too well, but it has an embossed kind of look to it, and so does this logo here. So I can do that with images as well as text. And so that's using the same lighting code, but just using a normal map to offset the light direction and such. And this was a really good excuse to actually render everything to textures as well. I did have some issues with depth testing because you sort of need a different frame buffer for each different thing that's not going to be colliding, I think, as far as I understand Vulkan. But anyway, it worked quite well anyway because it meant that I can sort of render text and stuff into a texture and then cache it out and not have to render it every frame, because it's a little bit more expensive to render this UI than it was to just render static images. But it doesn't really have any real performance impact as a whole, so it's fine. So that's probably enough looking at UI. I guess, yeah, we'll go on to gameplay. So the reason that I actually started looking at UI at all is because I wanted to add order markers. So now when you queue up an order, it's putting these little markers in the world. So I'd started doing that and I just didn't like the look of them at all. So I started I thought it was time to decide on a look. So this is it, and I'm quite happy with it. It definitely was challenging. A lot of the challenges were to do with like how these markers should be positioned in the world. Like when you go around the tree, you can see it's sort of rotating its position around the tree, because initially it was put inside the tree and then you wouldn't be able to see it because the tree was blocking it. Because these ones actually get hidden, and you know, I had to make sure that you couldn't select it when it was behind something and all of that. Yeah, lots of little challenges. But yeah, so the purpose of the markers is just to be able to see where all your commands are. And so I've got this store all. Before you couldn't see that all of these had orders to be stored, whereas now you can. And obviously if you're going to be able to queue up that many orders rapidly, you need to be able to cancel them too, which you can do at the click of a button. So another thing that I worked on was variable time speed. So now it's just gone night, it's kind of perfect. We can get them to move really, really quickly. And yeah, it actually works surprisingly well. They'll also go to sleep now, which is another new thing. So they've got needs, which I'll go into a little bit later. But yeah, so we're just sort of speeding through the night. It does bring a little bit of a kind of problem where this is the maximum speed and it's super fast when you're actually trying to interact with them, but the night still feels quite long. So I'm going to have to just figure out how I'm going to deal with that. So anyway, another cool thing is that you can actually now, let me just move this guy and pause it. So you can actually now pause the entire simulation, which but still carry on, you know, queuing up stuff, which is just great. I mean, for debugging, it's awesome. It's so nice having these controls, being able to just speed stuff up, and yeah, it's just great, and it's working so well. So the way that that'll work in multiplayer, I'm pretty sure anyway, is basically the slowest speed will win. So if someone pauses it, everyone will end up with it paused. If someone's running at normal play speed, then that'll, you know, no one's paused it, then it'll be that. And if everyone's happy to have it fast forwarded, then it will go and fast forward. But all of that should be configurable within the server file. And you know, games like I think like StarCraft or something would have a thing where, like, if someone's been paused for longer than, you know, 10 seconds, then anyone can just boot them out of the game or whatever. You know, I'll add stuff like that too, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. And I also added a couple of other options to be able to configure the day length, so you can make day and night pass much faster or slower. This is a server-side configuration option. And there's also an option to make the sun rise at the same time everywhere in the world, which is obviously completely physically impossible, but it could be quite useful for if people are playing very far apart and you want to all be kind of active at the same time and fast forward through the night. So yeah, it's an option, and it's working fine in the game, even if it sort of messes with your head a bit. So next would be building. At the moment we can't actually build any of these things. Let's just build some hay beds to get some things happening. All the icons are X's at the moment. I will change them to actually, you know, this will be a build icon because you've queued up to build the bed. So yeah, that's just a placeholder at the moment. So yeah, what else? We could build a campfire. Queue up one of those. I have changed that user interface as well, how that works. So you right click now to build, left click to inspect, and that's pretty good. It's nice and clean. You can sort of right click out of things as well. So left click to go into stuff, then right click to go out. Yeah, I've tidied up a lot of that. Okay, so this is one of the major changes now, is that these guys are all building this campfire, but they're actually just stacking the resources up next to it. And most of the buildings will work this way. So she's done that and now is actually, there we go, it's actually creating them in the final kind of phase. So there's sort of two phases to it. There's the resource collection and then the actual positioning, final positioning. So none of this is final, but it's technically quite a good step forward, because all of this animation is all client side. There's no kind of server requirement to like send a bunch of data or anything. Okay, so the beds that I queued up are built, but the campfire is not. Now the reason for that is that none of these people know how to build fires yet, and that's a new thing. So anyone can take the resources that are required. That's just sort of manual labor. They can just take stuff, but it takes skill to actually build anything other than very simple things like hay beds. So what we're going to do is tell Livia here to learn fire. So now she's actively researching fire, and as a result she can now come along and actually start building the fire. And as she does so, her fire skills will slowly increase. But yeah, a lot of this is sort of, it's work in progress, right? I mean, it's on the way there, but it's not. There's little polishing things that really need to be done. And the same with these animations. I've got some new animations in place, but and some new ways of sort of moving around, but they all need work. Okay, so she's just completed this campfire now. Her skill is still only at 21%. She could go on building a bunch of other fires, but none of them are lit now, so that's something that is also different. So now we can actually light the fire. And so she's now going to do this. I'll get her to not sit right in the fire. But yeah, so she's actually rubbing sticks together, although you can't see the sticks either. I'll probably add something like... make the animation a bit better. But so as she's doing this, she's learning. Now, that's going to take some time. And so, we can get everyone else to do some other stuff. We can, focus on other things. We can just speed up time and get it to happen really, really quick. But once she's done, she'll finally light the fire, and then she'll be able to light them much, much faster. So while she's busy learning how to make a campfire, you might have noticed these guys have all just walked over here. It's because they're now eating again. I'd broken that a few months ago, and I've finally got them actually eating. So they have a hunger need that slowly goes up, and then they go and find food nearby. And I think the hunger mechanic's quite important. It's going to drive your population in the future. So whether you can actually, like if everyone's hungry, then you're not going to be able to have more people show up and stuff. And it also, at the moment they can go out and gather these raspberries. There's quite a few little sort of fruits and stuff nearby, but they will take quite a long time to regenerate. So you're not going to be able to rely on that going forward. If you want to stay in a place, then you're going to need a more reliable food source. And that's where sort of hunting and farming and stuff is going to come in. And she's just finished her fire. So she's finally now got the fire skill, and she can now light fires a lot quicker. So I've just paused it again just because doesn't that look cool? When you can pause fire like that. I don't know, it's nothing really. But anyway, so the skills system, I think that's a decent start. I think it's actually going to work relatively similar to this, but we will see. One of my real goals is to try to have you actually specialize people. So there'll be a number of research types, and how I actually drive you to specialize them without it becoming a tedious micromanagement task is probably the biggest question of all of this, but that's kind of the goal. I want you to actually care about who is your fire starter and who is your best builder, and actually so that it's meaningful if you lose people too, because this is not going to be like all happy fun times. There will be threats, and people will die of starvation and of animal attacks and things like that. So I think it's important that you actually care about them for that to matter. And I almost forgot. I also added the ability to extinguish fires, and it's got like the worst kicking animation ever made. But the idea is that they're going to kick some dirt into the fire to extinguish it. So you've got full control over lighting and extinguishing of fires. Once this is lit, we could just extinguish it again and queue up that one to light. And so very shortly I'm going to make it so that they actually burn through wood as well. So that's cool. It's sort of, it shouldn't be too hard to get that working. But anyway, so that's probably it for today. That UI took probably a couple of weeks to do, and then I've spent a couple of weeks on all that kind of skills system and just refining all that. So Yeah, next on my to-do list is actually hunting of rabbits and chickens, of which there aren't any yet. So I will probably start adding some animals in the next week or two, unless I find a bunch of other things to do first, which is entirely likely. Anyway, hopefully they're all chasing chickens around next month. Wouldn't that be cool? Okay, so we'll see you then. Cheers.